Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name's Clint Button, and I'm a granite sculptor. Working on the project here, this waste mold for this small line fold maquette, and I've gone ahead and used just some blue tape as a release agent. It's quick and easy. There's cheaper stuff, I guess, but it works good for me. One easy tip when you're working, you can see this piece, I just tore the tape off. This piece did what I'm supposed to do. Right when you're at the end, fold a little bit of it back over on itself. You'll find out that it speeds up the day a lot because you're not chasing tape, especially if it's a piece of something that's very, very strong that's hard to get an end up. So that'll save you tape in the long run. So I'm going to use some naphtha as a release agent, naphtha soap, just laundry soap. I took my trusty old pocket knife, shaved off a bunch of pieces off of the end of here, scraped it into the old tin can, and then I use just a spray bottle to get it to how wet I want it. And that's a real easy way to get the consistency you want. Now, I'm going to talk about what I'm going to do. I'm going to use a low strength Plaster of Paris as a skim coat on this in the first place. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this naphtha that's, ideally you don't want lumps. I like it to be foamy like this. It helps me see what I can do. I'm going to paint the whole thing. This doesn't seem to compromise the plastiline at all. If you use Vaseline, like some people like to do, it will make your clay really sticky and really soft, and I don't like that because I like the consistency. I'm working here in the southeastern United States. It was, 90 something yesterday, last couple days here in May, and if the clay's super soft, it doesn't hold its shape, and so I don't like it to be too sticky. I like it to be the consistency I like. So I use this naphtha. I'll paint this whole thing now early on. I haven't got my water hose down here to the studio. I haven't got it out. I have to run my buckets of water to get everything ready like I need to. While this is drying on the clay, I can do all that. So I'm using my time well because I've got to be able to use my time effectively. Not too worried about this sticking up. This is just a model to stick on the wall. It's not that critical. I could put more tenacious tape where this bat has already had clay wedged into it before. It's got a little bit of oil, so it doesn't stick as well. So anyway, I'm going to do the other half of this here in a minute. And we're going to mix up some plaster. Now, the original first thin coat, the register coat, because this is a waste mold, that means I'm going to have to take the mold off after I cast it, put the mold on, let that cure. I'm going to have to take this all off, which probably means I'll have to run a wire or something under here to separate that more easily so I don't break it. Reinforce it a little bit. And but in order to, then I have to carve it away with literally a hammer and like some wood chisels or some cheap gouges and stuff like that. Not good stuff, but just work ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of food coloring in that guide coat to tint it. I'm going to put that on. That'll have some color to it. And before it kicks and cures all the way, I'll have to have another batch of plaster to back it up and cover the whole thing so I can get it off and it'll be strong. Now, the color will bleed a little bit, but when I'm carving it away from the outside and I'm cutting plaster away, when I get to that color, I know I can be careful and not hit it hard or push it hard because I'm almost to the cast investment or the job, the actual model that I'm trying to produce. So we'll just use the blue food coloring was the one that had the most end up in the kitchen, so that's what I'm using. You can go buy a big bottle of cheap food coloring and use what you need, but this is how we're getting started. So be back in a couple minutes with some more video. Okay, once your clay is all released, you're probably going to have some naphtha left over in your can. great. Just put it aside. It's soap. It'll dry out. Either you use it now, or you can put it in a Ziploc bag or whatever after it's dried if you have mice that like to eat naphtha soap or anything in your studio, or chipmunks or whatever. But you can just let that set, and when we do more work, I'll just squirt a little more water in there, make it wet again the way I want it, and keep going. You won't waste any money throwing away soap. You don't need to do it. Okay, we've mixed up our plaster, got it to a nice blue tint, some of the blue dye, and it's starting to kick over. It goes from being wet like milk to thick like cream to standing on your hand, and when it's about standing on your hand, it's getting close. So what we're going to do, I've released everything on here. We're going to start around the edges so it can start setting up and provide a little bit of the dam. But you can see that there's some body to it. I'll save some of the stuff towards the end because we've got a vertical side to do here that we'll just kind of have to pack it up in. This was just a quick reference model for direct carbon. Because this is wet, it takes a really good register. Because it's light blue, it shows really well. And it won't be super obvious. You can use a different color, green or red or whatever, but they all tend to bleed into the next layer of plaster. And so, I won't get into how to mix plaster and buoyancy and hydrating and mixing and everything. There's lots of videos online about that, tutorials from different companies depending on what product you use. I've done it for decades and I know what to do, and by the time I slow down and tell you what to do, it's already done. So, but I'm not as worried about the exterior perimeter of this, getting a good guide coat on in the middle here, because that won't be as difficult to remove. It will tend to break off in a big sheet. But I'll go out to the edges here. Now after this, I'm just going to build it with some regular, I'll probably use some hydrocal so it's a little bit stronger. I won't put any tint in it. And I'll put something to reinforce it a little bit. And that's pretty much it. So there's your guide coat for a waste mold. And try to have my videographer down here for the next part of it. And we'll put some product on here, just plain product. And get it all good. So there'll be more in a minute. Just hang on. Okay, this, I'm actually using a little bit of hydrocal because I've got more of it and the cost is about the same. To back this, this is the equivalent to the mother, just like this would be a silicone mold and this would be the mother. I'm putting a little bit on here just to slip it, so to help the adhesion, so I get a good grab. This is getting nice and hot. This is still wet, it's not thick. So I still gotta wait a few minutes for it to go on, but this will sort of buy me a little bit of time and give me a little better grab. You can use some wood, you can use some metal scraps, anything to reinforce this to help keep it rigid. And it, you know, like I said, it can be something you keep a pile of. I don't do many waste molds anymore. It just doesn't fit what I do. So I'm just using some wood scraps, and they'll help keep it a little more rigid as we break it up. We'll see if we can get this apart without a big failure. And because a lot of times these molds will deconstruct it from the back. This is a really flat mold, a flat job to cast. So let this plaster work a little bit. Okay, this back is starting to go off, starting to thicken up and cream in my hand. You got to be careful, because what you'll do is you'll measure out your ratios, get your plaster in your water, plaster hydrated in the water, whether it's plaster, hydrocal, Denistone, whatever, and then you'll think it's taken forever to go off and to kick over. You'll add more plaster, dry product, and it'll just turn into a rock, and you'll waste it. So this is finally kicking over, doing well. While I was waiting, I went ahead and put some of the wet on here to help slip it, so I'd get a better grab between the two plasters. You can see some of the white versus the blue guide coat. And I'm gonna hold this one on the end here, but I gotta wait till it's more rugged. I don't really want to get too close to the edges until it's pretty stiff, but getting these locked on here will help a lot with making it rigid. You can use metal. Some people will use real light. Angelo had a bucket full of angle iron that was real light gauge, like 10 gauge or something, with a bunch of holes drilled in it, and you carve it out and use it over and over again. I just grabbed this basically wood lath out of the scrap bucket in the shop. And I may have to put a second coat of this on. You see the bucket's going off really fast now. It's really starting out. So come around, swap those. Did put a little bit of soap here on the around the wood on the back, just because usually plaster won't stick to the wood super well. You need to have a key. If the wood's fairly smooth, it won't, but what will happen now is I can focus fairly aggressively to remove this lath, this reinforcement, and know that I'm still not going to be risking the mold. That's pretty much it. This all put together well. And I'll start cleaning my bucket, and then we'll probably set the camera up so I can fight this off. And so that's it. Okay, I decided to go ahead and do another batch, put a little more reinforcement on it. There were a couple spots I thought were thin, and I added 2 diagonals here up in the front to web these 2 together because this is obviously a weak point across there. There's no strength in the plaster to work it off. So that's about as thick as it needs to be. You're always at a trade-off because there's no hard, fast rules on this as to what's enough and what's too much. But what's too little is wasted money because you'll break that trying to take it apart, and you break it in a way that it can't be salvaged, and then you're all done. So I'm gonna look through my pile of goodies. I'm probably going to use some real high test fish line that won't have any great thickness to just go under this. This will all release really easy because this just comes right off. That's not going to hold at all. And so that means that the only thing that's going to hold this down is the clay that's stuck on the wood. So if I can go under this from both sides, I'll bump this to break it loose, just to loosen it, and just saw my way back and forth with a couple of 2 or 3 courses of fish line. It should come right apart. So we're going to let that cure for the day. And it's always a trade-off as to how long you let it set. The longer you let it set, the harder it gets, the more work it is to carve it off. So, but with a waste mold, you pretty much, you gotta, for something like this, I'm gonna let it cure really well. And then tomorrow we'll spend some time getting it all apart. We'll pull it apart and evacuate it, release it, charge it, and then start carving. Because you have to carve it off when it's still green, so that if there are any problems, that you've got a potential to fix it. Because usually anything that's really solid, that's really cured, older than a day or 2, it's really hard to make repairs on the plaster. It just doesn't grab to itself very well. So, but anyways, we'll probably wrap this video up. Once again, this is Clint Button at Carolina Sculpture Studio, working on a waste mold of a small bas-relief line fold project. Stay tuned for the next one. Thanks for coming in.